All right, sorry, I have started the recording. Anybody who does not want to be recorded, now's the time to drop from the meeting. Or you could just mute your microphone. So, all right, here we go. FT8. Let me share the proper screen. I always tend to share the wrong one. All right, does everybody see a thing that says intro to FT8?
Yes.
All right, perfect.
See your slides.
Good. All right, so we're going to talk about the FT8 digital mode. We're going to first go over the features of it, talk about the software that's used for it, go over some of the best practices, and then I'll attempt to do a live demo. I haven't quite figured out how all the audio stuff's going to work with Zoom meeting connected and all that, but we'll play that by ear. So features, FT8. It's a newish mode. It was announced by Joe Taylor on June 29th, 2017. So I say newish, but it's definitely new in the grand scheme of digital HF modes, a lot which have been around for what seems like forever. It can be used on any band, any radio. Some radios are easier to connect than others. FT8's done all the way down on 160 meters, and I've seen people do it all the way up on 440 UHF. So there's really no restriction to the type of radio. I've seen people do it over handhelds before. So it only uses 50 megahertz of bandwidth, and we'll talk about what that means later. So let's compare that to some of the other modes that we use. So only 50 hertz of bandwidth. Like I said, megahertz. So we have FM at the top, a typical FM 25 kilohertz. FM narrowband, that would be kind of like our D-Star repeater, maybe DMR, 6 1/4, 6,250 hertz. Yeah. AM is 6,000, sideband 3,000, CW, which everybody talks about how efficient CW is 150, and FT is only 50. So you can see there on the chart, tried to make it as visual as possible. So very, very little bandwidth used. All right. So based on those numbers, it's possible to have 60 transmissions at one time on one 3,000 hertz single sideband channel. And I put channel in quotes because we don't use channels, but one single sideband frequency, I guess, would be the proper word. So your transmit duration is only 12.64 seconds. It kind of rounds that up to 15 seconds. So that way everything is time synced, and we'll talk about some of that later. Everything has to be synchronized. You have these 15-second segments, of which 12.64 is actually when you're transmitting, and everything has to be synchronized. So if your clock on your computer is 3 seconds slower than the clock on the other guy you're talking to, your transmission may go on longer when his has already been told to stop receiving. So in order to use this mode, it's important to run some type of a network time tool that connects to a time server. And I'll show that in the live demo as well.
Ben, I might have missed the words there. You said the transmit duration is 12.64 seconds.
That's correct.
That's what the window of opportunity when everybody transmits?
Nope, it's a back and forth. So for example, if you and I were talking, we would have an even, what I call even and odd. So you would be on the 0 second and the 30 seconds.
Sort of like
and I would be,
like
and I would be on the 15 second and the 45 second transmit. Okay. So every 15 seconds we go back and forth, but the duration of time within that 15 seconds that you're actually transmitting is 12.64.
That just seems very, very long. I would have thought it was less than a second.
Nope. It's very long, and that's part of what makes it kind of robust. There's a lot of error correction in there.
Okay.
So I've worked stations that I could not audibly hear at all over the speaker, but I've worked them. So
I guess that's how they get that very, very narrow bandwidth, is increase the duration of the time.
yep, that helps as well.
Would not have guessed that. Okay,
Yep.
I'm glad you clarified it.
Yeah. So just what we kind of talked about, this means a whole QSO could be in as short as a minute because it's a fixed QSO. It's not like PSK31 where you can sit and chat with your keyboard. It's very regimented. It's very fixed. You call CQ. I could call CQ, have you answer me and say, this is station ABC, answering your CQ with your signal is negative 21 dB. And then I would answer and say, copy that, you're negative 5. And then you say 73s, and that's the end of the transmission. That's it.
But that's all automated and unattended?
You have to attend it. You do have to the QSO, individual QSOs are automated, but the software forces you to kind of reset and go back to calling CQ again manually. That way you can't just, I'm sure someone has or could modify the software to do this, but they don't want people doing that. They want it obviously attended. It's not supposed to be a beacon. You're actually communicating. You need to be at the radio. But there's a button you have to hit to kind of start over again. So you have to be at your computer. Now I have hit CQ and called CQ and gone and got a cup of coffee and came back up and it was still calling CQ, or it was in the middle of that QSO and then it ends. And so you'll see here in the demo. So that's just what we talked about, auto sequencing of the transmissions. The initial setup's pretty easy, especially if you have more modern radio. So if you have like a ICOM, one of the newer ICOMs, like the what's it, the 9100, or what's the popular one that's out now? Is it the 7300 that everybody has, I think? Yeah, those all have USB jacks in the back. And when you plug that USB cable from the radio into the computer immediately sees it as a microphone and speakers. It'll treat it as a microphone and speakers. So you're already digitally connected to your radio. And then over the same USB cable, it will do the keying of the radio as well. So, and you just go into software and tell it, yeah, I have an ICOM 9700 and I'm hooked up via USB. Pretty quick initial setup. If you have an older radio, you do need some type of an interface, a serial connection to key it, and audio cables, or a rig blaster type unit to adapt it into your computer. So let's talk about the software real quick. It's called WSJT. That's the official FT8 software. There do appear to be other pieces of software out there now that are capable of FT8. Usually it's another larger package that just added FT8 in as a feature, but the WSJT is the software that came out. So software was originally released in 2001, and it does other modes too. I think you heard Marv and I talking earlier. There's FT4, JT2, JT4. I don't know all the differences between these modes. I know the timing, like what you talked about earlier, Jim, some of the timing is shorter on the transmissions, but then you don't get as robust of error correction and things like that when you have signal fade. So
yeah, the FSK 144 is for meteor scatter.
okay, yeah, so meteor scatter. So just what I said earlier, the software is pre-configured for most radio models. It's, if you have USB, it's really just plug and play. You tell it, I have this kind of radio, and here's the USB port I plugged into. It does not include the time sync software that I talked about earlier. So if you get the WSJT software, you still need kind of a third-party software running that checks in with the server and synchronizes the clock on your computer every few minutes. So it does auto logging and auto spotting. So you can have it, you have the person's information, it's already there in the screen, and it will automatically create a log that you can upload to EQSL or QRZ or Logbook of the World, or whoever, whatever kind of electronic logbook you like to use or logging system. And it will do spotting too. There's a map I'll show you where you can see what stations have heard you, and you can turn on, all it is to click a button if you're connected to the internet to become one of those stations as well. So as you see a list of 50 stations that transmitted on the last cycle, remember I talked about the even and odd cycles, the zeros, the 30s, and the 15s, and the 45s. It'll all kind of make sense, I think, once I show the screen. So, and you can get visual and audio alerts for unworked countries or zones, which is really cool. So I can leave mine running. And so for example, the other day I needed Paraguay. I didn't have Paraguay. I was trying to get all the South American countries and just didn't have Paraguay on FT8. So as the lines of stations went up, there's this big purple one, and I got this loud ding sound on my computer and came in and saw there's Paraguay. So you see all the stations that you've already worked, stations you haven't worked, and you can color code things however you want. You can customize all the color codes and the sounds as well. So it's really cool if you're trying to get a particular country or whatever, you can have it make a specific sound out of your computer while you're monitoring. And you have a waterfall, just so like the waterfall you see on the fancy new radios of the RF spectrum. This is the same thing, but this is audio spectrum. So you have the low end audio frequencies and the high end audio frequencies, and you're looking at a bandwidth of audio and not necessarily RF. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at the spectrum, at the waterfall on this here in just a moment. I'm going to go over some best practices, and I'm just putting these here because I've done all of these things wrong. All right, so listen before you transmit, just like any other ham channel. We need to listen before we transmit, and because we do have those, every other 15-second transmissions, we need to listen for a minimum of 30 seconds to make sure that even though the even isn't clear, we don't have someone on the odd calling CQ every odd cycle. And it's nice because usually if someone's calling CQ on the odd, they're expecting people to answer them on the even side of that same audio frequency. So we wouldn't want to transmit there as well. So just like any other band, any other mode, we listen before we transmit. And this one's more of a pet peeve of mine, but I say try to transmit on a 50 hertz increment. So for example, if you can be on 1150 hertz versus 1142 hertz, if everybody spaced out evenly like that, we'd be able to fit a perfect 60 QSOs at one time in that bandwidth. But I don't know if people are doing like their favorite number, their like birth date, or their ATM pin code, or what they're doing, but people will get on these random frequencies, 1847 or something. It's like, well, that was a great year, but if you could just go up to 1850, we could fit another person in between you and the guy down on 1800. So little pet peeve of mine, but I think it's good practice for us to use our bandwidth efficiently whenever we can, and that's one way we can do it. So you want to turn off any kind of ANF, noise blankers, noise reduction. It's going to just see the signals as noise, and it's going to try to null them out and cancel them out and correct them. You really want what I call a raw receiver. You want really no filtering whatsoever, especially any kind of digital filtering. First time I did this, I had my ANF on, and ANF will chase the loudest consistent sound, and so some of my loudest stations were getting nulled out. Yeah. See, I was a newbie at one time.
Ben, are you listening to the sound, or the sound would just be static to your ears, I guess? So the volume, you turn the volume down.
So I'll show you real quick how it sounds. Let me turn my radio up here, or at least attempt to. There we go. Let me move my microphone.
Mhm. It's the Loch Ness Monster in the background, I think.
Sounds like a herd of cats being
Yeah.
tortured or something.
Yeah.
So did you hear it? It was just a bunch of squealing, different tones.
Yep.
So probably was not a pleasant sound, so I didn't want to do it for too long. So I want to make sure our filters are, so if you have a IF filter or any filtering, you want to make sure it's off or set to at least 3000 hertz wide. So that way you can see the whole spectrum. So again, less filtering, the better in this particular mode. We talked about turning off all the other stuff. We also want to turn off AGC or set it to fast if you have like a fast. I don't think ICOM lets you turn it off. They just have like a fast option. Leave your squelch open. No need to squelch the signals. Just leave the squelch all the way down because sometimes the squelch may not open quite quick enough to get the first set part of the transmission. And you just want to, when you go to transmit, you want to look at your ALC if your radio has one, and you either want to just barely tickle that ALC, just give it a peck, a little kiss there. You don't want to max out. Don't do like I did and max out your ALC. What will happen is when you go to transmit, it will see this burst of audio, try to knock it way down and then bring it back somewhere toward the middle and do a lot of corrections for it. And on the other end, it just looks like a signal that's rapidly fading up and down. So, and then what you're possibly doing is using more than that 50 kilohertz of bandwidth as well. You're just getting to have way too wide of a signal. So you just want to just the first little dot on that ALC is all you need. Or if you don't have an ALC, adjust your audio so that you're just hitting your radio's peak power. You can turn it down too low and only put out half your power if you want to, because you're not feeding in enough audio on sideband. And this all is inside, is all in. It's one thing I didn't put in the presentation that I need to add actually. Everything on FT8 is done on upper sideband. It doesn't matter what band you're on, you're always on upper sideband on FT8. I knew I'd get halfway through this and realize I left something important out. So just what I said, no LC, just set it to barely, where you're barely getting your full output. And overdriving may actually hurt your signal as the ALC does its thing. Set your receive audio in the green on the software. I'll show you that here in a moment. There's a little setting for that. So let's just go into the demo. Give me 1 second to transition here to the other computer. And we will see how this goes. Fingers crossed. We should have another Ben joining the meeting here soon. Yay, there we go. All right, we don't want computer audio. We do want to share the screen. All right. So we're probably all seeing ourselves now. Let me minimize this, get this out of the way.
All FT8 is done in upper sideband no matter what frequency.
That's correct. All right, so here is the software. I'm not going to go over all the radio setup and go into deep details. There's YouTube videos on this. That's kind of the advantage to only having really one piece of software for this mode, or one official piece of software for the mode, is that everybody's using the same thing. A lot of people have already done YouTube videos on the setup, but configuration was pretty easy. So I'm just going to go over the screen here. You kind of have the waterfall. Like we discussed, you have the segments here. And every one of these you can see is at 15 or 45, or sorry, 0, 30, 15, or 45 are the different segments. And I'll do a QSO real quick and we'll just walk through how that works. My audio is a little high, but think I can get away with that right now, my receive audio. So let me grab a piece of low-hanging fruit here. We'll do Cuba. I've actually talked to this guy in voice before, C08LY. He's a pretty well-known station. So we'll just double click on him. And when we double click on him, it does a bunch of things all at once. It takes my receive and transmit frequency and sets it to his. It enables the transmit, which it just disabled because someone else is answering him. So it's set to kind of there's a mode you can set, but it's set to kind of a friendly mode to where if I see that he's already answering somebody, I'm not going to go, ooh, Nicaragua. See, there's a station I don't have. That's what I was saying earlier. So if I had my audio up on that computer, which I don't right now because I'm going through the Zoom call, I would have gotten a tone. But you can see I got that nice, bright, kind of purplish color, dark purple, violet color there to indicate, hey, here's a country that you don't have, that you've never worked on FT8 before. So you can kind of chase after that. But I'll get him later. I want to get some low-hanging fruit here. So.
And the purple ones like that, Nicaragua, is that because you set Nicaragua or because you haven't checked it off?
Because I haven't worked it. It does all that automatically.
Okay, so is a brand new user, everything to be purple?
It knows there's no Nicaragua station in my log.
Okay.
So it's doing that. So
cool.
We're answering the CQ to NS2X right now. And we only had a partial transmission. We started at 24 where we would have started at 15. So he probably didn't get the first one. So it enabled the transmit. We're transmitting now. I'm looking at my radio. I can see that my ALC has one little tick on it. And this power level here is basically your audio output level to the radio. So this is a little misleading in that it's called power. You're not adjusting the actual RF power output of your radio per se, than you are the audio going into your radio, which therefore controls how much RF is going out on sideband.
I see he answered you.
So he's answered me back. I have him at a +9. He has me at a -6, and he's answered he's answered me and says, you know, I heard you. I have you at -6. I've answered him back and said, I received yours. I have you at +9. And then he says 7 3s. I say 7 3s, and that's it. That's the entire QSO right there. You just saw it. Pretty darn quick. So I'm still myself trying to figure out what some of these numbers mean. This is not gain as far as your RF gain. This is certain decibels below
your noise level.
The noise level, or the noise, not necessarily the noise floor, because that's still more of an RF term, but the audio noise level.
Signal to noise ratio.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and the DT is the difference in time, how much that station is off from.
Yep, this is the difference in time. So 0.0, very good point. 0.0 means that I was synced
Right
perfectly with that station. I've seen where anything, you know, less than a second, you're fine. Once you get over a second, you start having sync issues. Like this person right here is 1.5. They may have some issues communicating due to that. And so I found this free program here called Dimension 4. And it'll automatically find a server, or you can choose one. I chose the one in Gainesville, University of Florida, Go Gators. And they have it's called an SNTP server. It's basically a time protocol server that synchronizes the timing on the computers. And it goes every 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes, it reaches out to that server and it synchronizes my time, or if I wanted to do it quicker, I can click the button there and it just added 0.123 seconds to my clock. So that's a QSO. You can see it's a very crowded band. I mean, you can see the whole 3,000 hertz wide band is just packed. I mean, get to this time of night on 40 meters, you got to kind of elbow your way in there if you want to call CQ or anything like that. So I was planning on calling CQ. I just don't think I'm going to right now because there's just so much activity. One more state here, Slovenia. We'll answer them real quick and see how that goes. I wanted to get at least one DX station so you guys will be mildly impressed at least. So that's the cool thing. I mean, if you don't have a big station like me, you know, I have 100 watts and some wire that I found in my garage. I mean, that's literally my setup. There's a 100-watt transmitter and some leftover electrical wire. You can at least feel
most guys are
station
running.
on FT8. What's that, Mark?
Most guys are running modest power, 50 watts, 60 watts.
Yeah. I don't think most people are running over 100 watts on this. If you're running 100 watts and you have a beam or whatever, you're a big station on FT8. So it looks like he was answering someone and he went back to calling CQ. So we're just going to answer him again. And it looks like there's actually 2 stations transmitting on this frequency calling CQ at the same time. That is something interesting you'll see every now and then. What is even more interesting about this is normally they'll have a very close signal level. So I would expect this to be like a 1 and a 3 or a 4. But you can actually decode 2 stations at one time on the same frequency or very close. This guy's only 10 off. So it's very interesting to see that happen, especially with 2 stations that have quite a bit of signal. So here, obviously, the higher numbers, the better. So the people with the 1s are going to work better than the people with negative 10s. You can get all the way down to negative 24. And I have actually worked a station where they were negative 24 the whole time. It would just happen to be late at night, real quiet. There was no one else in that little spectrum of the band, and it just happened to work out good for us. Sometimes you have to be patient. You do have to go back. You know, not every QSO is as smooth as this one. Sometimes they'll answer you, and you'll have to answer them 3 or 4 times before they heard you, and then they'll answer you back. But your computer will sequence to the next thing you're supposed to do. So that's FT8. I didn't want to go into too big of a deep dive because, like I said, there are plenty of YouTube videos out there if you do want to get the software. And this cost me nothing. I mean, I had the USB cable already, and the software is free, and it's a great mode, and it's $0 out of my pocket to get started in it. I've made well over 1,000 contacts. I started doing FT8 toward the beginning of last year. And I'm trying to see if there's a way on here you can see just your FT8 contacts.
Since
Mode.
Since your logging function is triggered by you sending the 73s.
Yeah.
Some guys, if they don't copy the 73s, it's just not, your contact's just not logged.
Yeah.
And you try to get a QSL card out of them and they'll say you're not in the log.
Yeah. So I have roughly 2,000 QSOs, 2,074 minus a few of these FM voice ones here. And then I have almost 1,100 confirmed QSOs where people have, you know, answered back on QRZ or whatever. So, but all kinds of countries, anywhere, everywhere. I just got Japan today, which is nice. Here's the map I was telling you about where they kind of do the spotting. So this is a map of all the stations here. And what I've done is I've set it to 40 meters, and I've told it, give me all the signals that have been sent by K7BEN. And then I did all modes, even though I'm only working one mode right now. But if you happen to have a big station, you're working more than one digital mode at a time, you can do it by the specific digital mode. And then we can look at the last 15 minutes. So in the last 15 minutes, all of these stations have heard me at some point. So you can see it's a pretty good band tonight, down to South Africa and all of Europe, South America. During the day, I'll usually go to 15 meters or 20 meters during the day is is very popular on FT8. So just a little idea of what you can do to see your signal. And then there you can kind of do the reverse of it and say, show me all the stations that I've heard. And these are all the ones that I've heard. And this, I forget what this is. This is kind of the, show you the cluster where you're hearing the most. So it's called pskreporter.info. There's a little map on there. But anyway, that's all I have. Any questions before we wrap up the presentation? Any other questions or comments? Or Marv, do you have anything to add that I didn't think of?
No, you got it all. Sometimes instead of keying a transmitter, a lot of the guys will use Vox.
Yeah, Vox works as well. Yeah, so if you don't
It's
have
using
that,
audio coming out of your sound card, it
Yep.
keeps your transmitter on Vox. A
Yep,
lot of guys
exactly.
like to use that instead of
Yeah,
the
that's-
hardwire and push to talk.
Yeah, that's the way I used to do it back when I very first got started at the beginning of last year. I had an ICOM 706 that I was using, and I just wired in the speaker to the microphone of the sound card and the audio in to the speaker out of the computer, and then used Vox for keying, and it worked just fine. So, all right, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording, and then we'll close out the meeting.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Let me know if you hear anything more
Yeah.
on 6. I'm going to go ahead and leave.
Okay.
Hey, that Sylvania guy just worked. You worked him.
Yep.